Hey, this is Seth Parnell, minister of the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 195 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing well. Hope things are going your way. And appreciate you stopping by here tonight just for a quick Bible study. The weather around here has been pretty good so far. We've had some storms this week, but today it wasn't in the 95, 100 range, so it was kind of actually pretty nice outside. And so if you were able to weather some of the rain and storms, I think we're going to have some more rain here next week. I think you probably had a pretty good day as well. But it's been like I said, been pretty good overall. So I hope it's treated you good as well. Always appreciate you being here. As we always do, we want to give you an invitation. If you're someone who is in the local area, then come by and see us. We're located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. Right now, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 10 o'clock for class, 11 o'clock for worship service, then 5 o'clock on Sunday night, and 6 o'clock for Wednesday night. And so if you're in your area, please, come by and see us. We'd love to talk with you, love to worship with you, and get to know you as a brother and sister in Christ. Also, if you're someone who has suggestions about your future episodes, then please feel free to send those our way as well. We'd love to hear what you have to say and have you, love to do things that benefit you. And so, know you have that opportunity as well. And I think you're right now at Portia. We were going over the book of Acts on Wednesday night. We're doing a study chapter by chapter on it. And then on Sunday morning, we're studying Ezra and Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the wall and the exiles coming back to Jerusalem. And so pretty interesting study. And so hopefully you may join us for one of those if you're in the area. But other than that, we are going to get started here. We've been going through the series on the judges for a while, and this is going to be our last judge. Well, we may talk about Samuel. Technically Samuel is the last judge, and so we may go into him. This is one of the last judges. We have Samson, and Samson, pretty interesting character when you take a look at him from a character study point of view. He's pretty unique, and what he did and the type of person that he was and how God used him. But before we get started with that, we want to welcome Jackie Henry. Hope that you are doing well. Hope things are going your way. I always appreciate you being here with us. And we got Ted Knight as well. Hope that you are doing good. Hope you've had a wonderful week so far. A while back, he preached a gospel meeting at Portia, and had some fantastic lessons. He's a great preacher, and so we really appreciate all the work that he put into that meeting. And it was a great thing to be there. But it's good to have you here tonight. But we're going to start here in Judges chapter 14, and we're going to read a little bit of the first section here, and then we'll get started. We're definitely not going to get through the entire story of Samson tonight. That would take a pretty long time because out of all the judges, we have a lot of information on Samson, which is interesting because from a moral perspective, Samson is maybe one of the worst judges from a moral perspective, but yet we have almost the most information about him. Othniel, who it says he was, faithful, he was someone who was good, we have a short little paragraph. Samson, who's going to get into all sorts of trouble of his own doing, we have chapters, of him. So it's interesting that the Bible chooses that way to present the judges, but that's how it's laid out. And if you look at chapter 13 of the book of Judges, you'll see the story of Samson's birth and how it was something that was unique as well. His mother and his father were out. Actually, his mother was out in the field when an angel of the Lord appears to her and tells her, "You're going to have a son. And so you need to stay away from things that are unclean and do not, drink any type of alcohol. And because this is going to be a special, kid." Her husband, a man by the name of Manoah, he almost didn't believe it at first, but then the angel appeared to them again, and he was able to talk with them face to face, and they realized that something special was happening. She didn't have any other kids. She was barren at the time, but yet God allowed them to conceive a child and said this child was going to be special. And he was going to be named Samson. And so Samson, was born, and he had these special conditions. He did not, shave his head. He did not cut his hair, and he did not, drink any alcohol. And so he had the what was called the Nazarite vow, in which he participated. And this is going to play a role in the strength that he has and what he is known for. As we said, a lot of these judges are known for a certain trait or a certain thing they have. We have Ehud, the left-handed judge, and we have Gideon, who led the 300 and had the torches, and the lanterns. We have, Deborah, who is the woman judge, the one who was able to defeat the Canaanites. They all have different things they're known for. Samson is known for his mighty strength that he has. He's going to have almost superhuman levels of physical strength that God is going to bless him with, and that he is going to use against the Philistines. Because as we'll see here, if you look at, I believe it's in chapter 13, it says, as you know, we've been talking about this cycle and how Israel will be delivered from a nation, and then they will be faithful, and then they will start falling back into idolatry, then they will fully commit to idolatry. Then God sends another kind of a method of oppression, usually a nation, to oppress them, and they rule over Israel for a certain period of time before the next judge is raised up, before they cry out to God and they realize that God is their Savior. And so this happens. The Philistines oppress the Israelites for 40 years until Samson comes along. 40 years, which is a pretty long time. You imagine a child who was born, a couple of years before the Philistines. That's all they would be 40 years old. That's all they would know is the oppression of the Philistines. But now Samson is going to be born, and God's going to have a special purpose for him. But it's good to see Donna and Vonda and Jim. Hope that you guys are doing good. It's always good to have you guys here as well. Hope the day's treated you well. Appreciate you being here. But here in verse 14 it says, "Now when Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw a Philistine woman. And then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw a Philistine woman at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. But his father and mother said to him, Is there not a woman among your kin, or among all our people, that you must go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me, because she pleases me. His father and mother did not know that this was from the Lord, for he was seeking a pretext to act against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel." And so we see the landscape, is presented here. The Philistines had dominion over Israel. You think about just as, David, would fight the Philistines, later on. The Philistines and the Israelites did not get along at all. And this was going to be one of the many kind of clashes and battles that they would have. But we're introduced to Samson. This is the kind of the first story that we have of him as an adult. And it says that he comes up to his father and mother, and he says, I saw a Philistine woman at Timnah, and I want her to be my wife. And this kind of baffles his parents. They say, isn't there one among the Israelites? Isn't there one among our people? Do you have to go to the Philistines in order to find a wife? And what was Samson's response here? Basically says, I don't care. She looks pretty, she looks good. Get her for me, as my wife. And so we already see kind of the way that Samson operates, the way that he has the character that he has developed, over the years. And while there's some characters in the Bible who start out faithful and then kind of fall away from God, there's some who have kind of like a shaky faith. But Samson, on the other hand, at least partially to his credit, he almost never pretends, to have almost any sort of faith. But he is someone who always acts on impulse. He always acts based on his physical desires, and that's what he does. That's who he is. But one of the more interesting, verses here in this first part is that in verse 4, where he says, his father and mother did not know that this was from the Lord, for he was seeking a pretext to act against the Philistines. This was in practical, life advice. This was not a good decision, for Samson. Because was a Philistine wife going to lead Samson closer to God or away from God? She was going to lead him, away from God, and any influence she had on him. And so, from a spiritual perspective and from a practical perspective, this was not a good idea. But it says this was the will of God. This was what God wanted to happen, because he was seeking a pretext to act against the Philistines. He was seeking a reason. He was seeking a method for Samson to basically get angry and declare war on the Philistines. And we'll see this unravel here later on in the chapter. And it kind of begs the question, as far as, what God can use in this world to accomplish his will. Can God use people who are immoral? Can God use people who are not not really faithful to him? Can he use them to accomplish his will? Well, we see during the ages of the captivity, when the Babylonians came, when the Assyrians came, God used those individuals in order to punish Israel because of their unfaithfulness, and he used them to accomplish his will, even though they themselves were not faithful people. They were not spiritual people by any means. Now, this doesn't discount them from being personally responsible for their own spirituality, their own decisions, because they had their moment as well. They had their moment of accounting as well. They didn't, it wasn't God used these people and they were immune from these things. They still had to account for their own actions, but yet God used these immoral people in order to accomplish his will, which is an interesting thing that I find here. But we're introduced to the character of Samson here. He is very impulsive. He's very much a slave to his physical desires, and not someone who has a very spiritual mind at all. We don't see him doing anything like offering sacrifices or anything of that sort. He's mainly in the first part of the section going to be chasing women and trying to enrich himself by craft and by wisdom. And so we're going to see him do that. But it's good to have the Dunlaps here. Hope that you guys are doing good. Hope you've had a wonderful day today. I always appreciate you stopping by. And Farrell Nicholson is here, another great preacher. Good to have you here tonight. He says, "Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out." Romans chapter 11 and verse 33. Yeah. And that's something that Job learned as well, wasn't it? You can, and it's interesting because there are some people who put God in like a one-dimensional box, and they try to make one characteristic or one quality of God, and that's it. That's all that God is. Even though that God is so much more dynamic, he's so much more full and complex and real and genuine, than that. You can't just boil God down to one thing. But yet on the flip side, doesn't matter, how much you try to learn about God, how much you try to understand about him and try to learn about him from what the scriptures say. Romans chapter 11 verse 33 is still true. How unsearchable are his judgments, his ways past finding out. There are some things we don't understand. At least I don't understand in the Bible, why things turned out the way it did, or why this decision was made, or why they did this. But I have the confidence in the excuse me. I have the confidence in the wisdom of God, that the decisions that he makes are the best ones to make, even though sometimes I may not understand how or why. I have faith in the wisdom of God that is the case, because no one you can look at God and say, well, you made a mistake there. You shouldn't have done that, or this was the wrong way of doing things. Can we understand the mind of God? We cannot. And so we have to have that confidence in his wisdom, that he knows what is best, even though it may not. We may think that we have it figured out. We may think that we have it centered up, but in the end, God is the one who is beyond someone that we know. We should try to get to know God as best we can, as much as we can, but in the end, we can't fully comprehend, I don't think, until that day which we get to be with him in his glory, in heaven. We're not going to be able to truly comprehend, who he is. And so that's a great point to bring up, a great comment. But he uses these different types of people in order to accomplish his will. And like I said, it doesn't discount their personal responsibility and their accountability, but it does mean God. He used Pharaoh. He used the king of Assyria. He used the king of Babylonia. He used he's going to use Samson here. These are all these sorts of people who had a lot of moral problems, and some didn't have any spiritual merits to them, but yet God's will is something that is ultimate, and it cannot be thrown away. No matter how Satan tries, no matter how many schemes and plans that he has to derail the plan of God, in the end, God is going to win. And that's something that we know for sure. But he's going to get, and they, even with the protest of his parents, he says, I want this woman, this resident of Timnah. And so he goes with his father and mother, and they go down there, and they're going to talk, to this woman. And then verses 5 down to about verse, 9, they're going to go there, and I guess they'll make the arrangements for the marriage. I don't know how well Samson knew this woman, if he had met her before, or if he just saw her, thought she was pretty, and said, I want this woman as my wife, or if he actually knew her beforehand. I don't know. But they would kind of make the arrangements, and in verses 6 and through like verse 9, we have an interesting case in which we see the blessing that God has given Samson. This powerful strength. This almost this incredible, almost superhuman strength. We have a lot of movies about superheroes nowadays, but Samson, he had this almost superhero strength about him. He's attacked by a lion, a powerful beast, a deadly beast, and he's able to tear it apart with his bare hands. And this is a sign of what's to come, and it's not the only kind of powerful thing that he's going to do in his life, but this is just the beginning. And we also have an interesting case in verse 8 when it says that when he returned to marry her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. So he scraped it out of his hands and went on eating as he went. And so he killed this lion, and then there was honey in it when he came back, which is going to also play a role in what happens next as far as this riddle that he's going to come up with. And so they make this arrangements for this this marriage, and as we'll see, God was looking for a pretext against the Philistines, and this is going to happen right here, because just as Samson was not a man of morality, he was not a man of those good qualities or characteristics. He didn't have the fruit of the Spirit. That's not part of who Samson was. But his companions, the Philistines, weren't any better. They were just as cutthroat as he was. And so in verse 10, he says that his father went down to the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as young men were accustomed to do. And when the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. And so Samson said to them, "Let me put a riddle to you. If you can explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 festal garments." So they said to him, "Ask your riddle, and let us hear it." And he said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet." And so he's going to put them to his. He's going to kind of like make a wager, with them and say, I bet you if you give this riddle, if you can figure it out, you have 7 days to figure it out. If you can figure it out, then I will give you 60 changes of clothes, 30 linen clothes, 30 festal garments. I will give you 60 changes of clothes. As you know, a garment, especially a festive garment, was a pretty expensive thing back then. Everything that went into making a garment and to making you a set of clothes was a lot more extensive and expensive, than it is today. And so this was a pretty high dollar wager that he's making. And but he says, if you cannot figure it out, then you're going to give me, these 60, pairs of clothes. And so just as he was strong, he was kind of flexing his intellect here. He wanted to kind of outsmart these individuals, which is another thing to note. This man who was so strong and obviously had good, smarts as well as far as his intellect, he was not very wise. Just because you're a smart person, just because you have a lot of information, doesn't mean that you're a wise person. As you know, I've known several people who were extremely smart intellectually, but spiritually they were very poor in the wisdom that they had. And so we have to understand, what is truly important, in this life, and not be someone who chases after things that are temporary. But he makes this wager, with them, and they agree. They say, "Ask your riddle, let us hear it." And so the game is afoot, and they're trying hard to figure out what this riddle means and to explain what he is talking about. But when we get here in the bottom of this section, down here in the bottom of verse 14, it says, "But for 3 days they could not explain the riddle." They think about this for 3 whole days, and they cannot come up with an answer. They are stumped. They cannot think of what this riddle means that Samson is talking about. And so they start to get a little nervous. They start thinking, if we can't figure this out, we're going to have to pay this man. And it's not just about the payment in itself, but they're going to be disgraced. They're going to be humiliated. And they're going to kind of lose face here in this situation. And so not only are they going to be out of a lot of money, but they're going to do it in a way that they're going to be humiliated. And that's not something that they are wanting to do. And since these are individuals that have no morality or no spiritual inclination, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to cheat. In verse 15, it says, "On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, 'Coax your husband to explain the riddle to us, or we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us?'" And so they go to Samson's wife and they say, "You're going to get Samson to tell you the answer to this riddle, and you're going to tell us, or else. Or we're going to burn your house down, we're going to burn your father's house down, and you're going to pay the consequences." So they're going to try to strong arm their way into getting this riddle. Because as I said, if you invited us here to impoverish us, like nobody forced them to accept this wager, to accept this this bargain that Samson made. Nobody forced them to accept this. They could have said, "No, we're not going to do this." But now they're in this situation, and now they can't figure it out. And so they're going to try to cheat and threaten his wife in order to let him to get him the answer to the riddle. And which you wonder why the wife just didn't tell Samson, just didn't say, "Hey, they're threatening me. They're threatening to burn my father's house." what are you going to do about it? I mean, I don't know why she didn't say that, but maybe she was scared, and so she goes through with it. And we get, not only do we have the first glimpse of this of the character of Samson in those first verses in which he sees this woman and he wants to marry her basically based on her looks. We see that here in verse 16. It says, so Samson's wife wept before him, saying, you hate me, you do not really love me, you have asked a riddle of my people, but you have not explained it to me. And he said to her, look, I have not told my father or my mother, why should I tell you? And she wept before him the 7 days that the feast lasted, and because she nagged him on, the seventh day he told her. And then she explained the riddle to her people. And so is this the first time that Samson is going to have a woman kind of pressure him and get him to reveal something that he didn't want to reveal? No, this is going to happen again, only the next time this happens, it's going to be a whole lot more costly than what it is here. Even though he's going to have to end up paying these big sum of money as far as these changes of clothes, what he's going to pay next time that this situation happens is going to be a lot more. He's going to lose his eyes, he's going to be captured by the Philistines, and he's basically going to be led to his death. And so they figure out, they get this riddle from his wife, and they tell Samson it. They're probably excited, and Samson figures out that they had threatened his wife, and so he kind of fires back at them here in the bottom of verse 18. And so but to his credit, Samson kind of kept up his end of the bargain, even though after all the shenanigans that went on, you wouldn't expect him to. But it says in verse 19, the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and he went down to Ashkelon, and he killed 30 men of the town, and took their spoil, and gave the festal garments to those who had explained the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. And so says the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him, and instead of earning this, instead of trying to pay from his own wealth, Samson just goes to another Philistine town. He kills them, takes all their stuff, and then uses that to pay off this debt. And so in the end, the Philistines kind of paid for it and got it at the same time, because Samson just took it from other Philistines to pay off these ones. And it says that he was in hot anger, and he went back to his father's house. And so the wedding didn't go through. The wedding was off. And so Samson is going to go back. And in the end, this is something that he regrets. We see that he's going to kind of cool off after a while. He's going to come back. And so we can see kind of the danger sometime of how anger can make you do something that you don't want to do. Now, was it better for Samson not to marry this girl? Well, maybe. She doesn't sound like she was the best influence on him. But he says that he stormed back to his father's house in this hot anger, and he left her alone, and so she was given to his best man. Anger, if it's if we let it run wild, if we let it be something that takes hold of a lot of the decisions that we make, then it can make us do things that we regret later on. And that's why these scriptures often give us a warning about the influence of anger, and how it can be something, like I said, that's dangerous. It says, don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. Don't let it be something that kind of eats at you to where it starts becoming a major influence, major voice in your head of what to do. And we should always be motivated by the desire to do good, the desire to do kindness, and not the desire to satisfy our anger. And that doesn't mean we're not going to have things that we're angry about, things that are going to cause us to be upset about. That's anger is a human emotion, and we're not going to get away from that. No matter how hard we try, there's going to be things in life that are going to make you angry. And so just being angry is not a sin. Just being angry is not, wrong in and of itself. What we're talking about here is if we dwell on it, if we let it, run our life and run our decisions that we make, that's when it becomes, a problem. And that's when we have to deal with it, spiritually. And so never conflate, those two things. It's natural, to be angry, but if we let that, run our life, then it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a problem. And so the Samson, he was mistreated in this case, and so you can kind of understand, why he was angry, because they had cheated in this wager that he had made. But yet we know this was the beginning. This was the will of God, that he was going to increase this friction, between the Philistines and Samson. And even though, like I said, Samson, I think as we said before, like Deborah was a great civic leader. She was a judge, and she was also someone who judged, who under the yoke. We know that people like Joshua and Samuel would be great spiritual leaders. They were great individuals to lead in that manner. Samson is neither of those. He's not going to lead in a civic sense or in a spiritual sense. He's just going to cause chaos and fight against the Philistines. And so we're going to see that, ramp up as we go throughout the rest, of this chapter, and how God's going to use him in a, unique way. But it was, he was someone who was destined, for greatness. And so, and he's someone, like I always, say, we need the negative examples just as we need positive examples, in the Bible. Because if we study the case of Samson, we can realize, where he went wrong, and try not to fall into the same traps, that he did. And so we can be someone that can be a blessing, to people, and not be someone who deals with the same problems that Samson did. And as I say, this kind of ends this chapter. And as I said before, there's a lot of information on Samson, and so we're going to be looking at a lot more here, later on. But I think we'll try to wind it down here for tonight, and we'll continue the story of Samson here, later on, as he's going to, like I said, it's only going to get worse. This friction between him and the Philistines, and he's going to get mad at them. They're going to get angry at him. He's going to retaliate, and it's just going to go back and forth, until we finally get to his meeting, of Delilah. But I appreciate everyone being here tonight. I hope that this was something that was beneficial to you, and I appreciate you taking some of the limited time out of your day in order to be with us and listen to us. That I know a lot of us are really busy, and there's a lot to do in a day, but the fact that you take some of that time out just to be with us for a little while, that means a lot. And so we appreciate everything that you guys do. But like I said, we'll be back here next week, I believe. Yeah, we'll be back here next week, for another episode. That'll be episode 196. And so until then, hope that you can be someone who is a blessing to people. Hope you can go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. I'll catch you next time.